Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. Border checks, the island's birth rate, and weekend roadworks were up for discussion this week. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Do you feel safe cycling on the island's roads? Are you a cyclist? Is it time for a rethink of the island's highway code? Cycling campaigners and commissioners believe it could be time for changes to the highway code. They're pushing for an update to the rules to protect two-wheel road users and get more people actively out on our roads. Meanwhile, 1 in 5 people in the UK apparently haven't ridden a bike for more than a decade. I've not ridden a bike for probably 40 years. A poll for the British Heart Foundation shows that 1 in 3 was scared of being knocked off or falling. Well, 1 in 10 admit that it's been so long since they got on a bike they've forgotten what to do. You never forget how to ride a bike. Do you feel safe cycling on the island's roads? Would changes to the highway code make you feel more confident about using a bicycle to get around? Tell us what you think. Stu, double header Thursday night was cycling into Douglas towards the top of Quegg Hill. 2 flashing lights on the back. Cattle wagon started to overtake me on the bend going down, but because he'd got to get out of the way of traffic coming up, he cut me off. The rear triple axle wheels of the trailer were less than a foot from my elbow. I knew he'd be going to the boat, so I chased off after him. I caught him on the weighbridge and gave him a piece of my mind. Not repeatable on the radio. He shrugged and said sorry, says Rob. Well, I don't know, Rob. I wasn't there. And you seem like a reasonable chap to me, but, you know, in terms of a big sort of articulated cattle wagon versus a bike, you would have thought that the bike could alter its course much more easily than the cattle wagon. Stu, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm sick of hearing cyclists wanting more rights on the road. Well, pay road tax and insurance then, and how can you enforce a safe passing space when they ride 3 and 4 abreast? It's stupid, says Graham. It's stupid. Why should they rule the road when they don't pay road tax or insurance, says somebody else. Hey boy, my missus was overtaken by a dopey cyclist the other day on the near side. Plonker. Then he stayed right up the bottom end of a double-decker. That's not the word that Graham used. No sympathy for idiots like that, says G. I was in Mallorca last October, cycling holiday, and there were big signs on the side of the road, 6 feet square, warning motorists that they're overtaking a cyclist, 1.5 metre passing distance, which I thought was a great idea. Why doesn't the Isle of Man government do that? Okay. Would have no objections to it being enshrined in law. Having a minimal passing distance where practical when passing a person on a cycle. The law would have to be in the singular, though. When referring to a person and cycle, it should be made unlawful for 2 cycles to ride in parallel, side by side. Well, when we've spoken to people about this in the past, they say that if you've got 2 bikers riding side by side, two bicycles riding side by side, then that's kind of the amount of space that you ought to be leaving anyway. And if it was a car, then you'd leave that amount of space. I have no problem in principle with the proposal that motorists should keep a specified minimum distance when passing cyclists. I would agree to it being included in the highway code, but I don't agree that it should be incorporated into law. How would it be enforced? How can a motorist determine precisely what distance they are from a cyclist or car? Or anything else that they're passing? How could a cyclist or any independent witness determine the distance between the cyclist and a passing vehicle? No one could determine the precise distance to the satisfaction of a court, and any law would therefore be unenforceable. Except that if a car runs into a bike, then they've clearly not left 1.5 meters, have they? I suppose that's the thing, and if it's law that they should have done, then that changes the whole prosecution. If cyclists want laws to protect them, then they should have to obey all the laws of the road. For one, always have lights, high vis, no undertaking, not ride on pavements. Pavements are for pedestrians, not cyclists. Also, get off and walk in pedestrian precincts, not ride through them at speed. That's from Brian in Douglas. I've said it before, I think all cyclists should have a visible ID so that the bad ones can be reported just like other road users. The moment they can get away with anything, I think insurance would be a good idea too, says Sue. If we're to have parity with cyclists, then let's bring in insurance and standards. Cyclists with very bright flashing front and rear lights which would be illegal on vehicles, but allowed on bikes, should be made less dazzling and less dangerous. If bikes are to be more popular on the roads, let's hope drivers will understand how to overtake and not cause long queues, says John. Well, that's my point, yeah. Until there's some form of identification on bikes and they contribute towards the roads they use, then things should be left as is. Also, they need insurance because if they damage a car, it is, I'm led to believe, a civil matter, so invariably it'll be the motorist out of pocket again, says Steve. All very well wanting equal rights on the road. Pay tax, constantly being held up by bikes on the way to work or just out and about. the 1.5 metre rule is ridiculous. People would be too scared to overtake, and there'd be even more tailbacks. All for fitness, but give them designated roads if necessary. That from Ian. We drive a car, we don't feel safe. What does the highway code have to do with this? They ignore it when they've passed the test. Honestly, the number of times that we've had to bang on the horn and get out of the way when people are in our lane. We live on quite a narrow road with 2 lanes, but we've seen people overtake on a blind corner and sit in the centre of the road. I dread to think how safe a bike could be. No, I'll stick with my car, thank you. Love from Susie. Thank you, Susie. Good, let's go to the lines. We've got Howard on.
Just listening there, it sounds like most of the areas have been covered and covered again.
Well, it seems that an awful lot of people are a bit cross about cyclists.
Yeah, well, the trouble is the people that, and in particular this chap that's doing all the shouting, they are, like they used to say, the whole army's out of step except our Johnny.
Right, yeah.
That was an old saying,
I like that.
This is what they're saying now, is that all the motorists on the island, which are, I think there's something like 40-odd thousand vehicles here on the island, we have now got to kowtow to the cyclists who, if they want to use the highway code, they are road users.
Yes.
So they should have a means of identification.
Yeah.
Lights, which most of them do nowadays. High-vis, which the modern cars are now fitted with daylight running lights.
Yeah.
So high-vis jacket. You see an awful lot of these fellas going around with the Lycra suits on in black.
Yeah.
But also they should have insurance.
Yes.
And that should be mandatory.
Yep.
Because if they run into you, who pays the bill?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably not them.
Yeah, they're running around, and as I say, the whole system is out of kilter because now these people on their bikes, and I've got nothing against bikers, fine. It's a healthy, for some people, occupation.
Yeah.
My old legs wouldn't do it now, but they should, if they're quoting the highway code, they should then obey the highway code.
Yes. All right, fair comment.
As a fulcrum.
Yep, all right, reasonable, that. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. Thank you, Howard. Need to move on. We've got Brian on. Hello, Brian.
Tell me, if we're going to have a rule that says you've got to stay 1.5 metres away from a cyclist...
Yes.
If the cyclist is 1.5 metres away from the pavement or the hedge, then you've blocked the road up, haven't you?
Oh, yes.
So, distance from cyclists isn't going to work. The other thing I'd say is, what about other road users? You could say 1.5 metres from horses, or, I drive a JCB quite a lot on the road. And
you don't obey any rules then at all, do you? You just sit there.
None at all. Yeah, but you see, people don't realise when you're driving a digger, there is no suspension. Your only suspension is in the tyres.
Yes.
And on a Manx road, particularly Douglas Promenade, I spend most of the time with the seatbelt fastened really tightly to stop my head hitting the roof. And the front bucket is dancing all over the place.
That would explain a lot. If your head's been hitting the roof of the cab, then that explains it all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And cars overtake, and bicycles have overtaken me in St. Mark's a few weeks ago. A chap cut in front of me on a bicycle. And I thought to myself, he has no idea how little control I've got over 10 tons of steel here.
Yeah. With big teeth on the front of the digger, probably.
Oh, absolutely. But, I mean, we keep coming up with these ideas, wheels on horse trams and all sorts of things. You've got to think them through. They've got to be practical and workable.
Yes.
At the end of the day, think about these things. I appeal to all the people that are out there coming up with all these schemes and wish lists. If you try and apply them practically, somebody has to implement it, and it would just become totally unworkable in seconds.
All right, fair dues. Thank you very much, Brian. Let's move on because we've actually got Rob Holden on the telephone now to pick up on these comments. Rob, good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. You'll have heard quite a lot of the comments are fairly, well, not anti-biker, but are saying that, if you want to have rights according to you on the roads, then you've got to obey the same rules as everybody else.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that, Stu. I listened to a few of the calls, and it is pretty much Groundhog Day, really, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think if I could just give you an overview of where I'm coming from, I as part of Isle of Man Cycling, as you may be aware, there's a bigger picture to this in so much that Isle of Man Cycling's run the sport on the island for forever, as long as there's been the sport.
Yeah.
And as you know, what's happened over recent years is the boom in cycling has put more cyclists on the road, leisure cyclists, sports cyclists, etc., etc. So what we've become aware of that primarily the issues caused to motorists by cyclists are generally the group rides.
Yeah.
So that's, the organised rides, meet at the gates, the guys who go out in the Lycra, the weekend warriors, whatever you want to call them. And I think that's where Isle of Man Cycling can play, let's say, a bigger role in that. What I would say is some of those weekend warriors that do go out are not members of clubs, so I do think our cycling clubs can play a bigger role in helping educating riders who wouldn't necessarily just randomly ride two abreast and not very neatly on the roads. I mean, there is a reason why group cyclists ride two abreast.
I understand that, yeah.
Yeah, and there's lots of education on why it's actually safer. Now, I know it's hard for some motorists to comprehend that, but the bigger picture is where Isle of Man Cycling coming from is the 1.5 metre passing rule is one small part of trying to make the road safer for more people who wouldn't ordinarily ride the bikes to do it as part of their daily routine. So
okay, well, yeah, I mean, I get that, but we get the feeling that the cyclists want the laws changed to suit themselves, but they're not prepared to help themselves out. I mean, thinking about people riding around in black lycra, and I know that's probably Mark Cavendish and Peter Kenyock have got team uniforms that are black, but, we often hear about cyclists who people just can't see on the roads. So, you need to help yourselves almost, don't you?
I would agree. I mean, so for example, then the 1.5 metre initiative was developed after Kate Bird was tragically killed by Isle of Man Safe Cycling. Now, that isn't an Isle of Man Cycling Association initiative, but we do support drivers giving more space to cyclists. Now, whether that's in legislation or not. Now, what it does address, I think, is that as British Cycling are doing in the UK now, is campaigning for better education at driving test level, to incorporate how you deal with cyclists on the road. So
but that's part of the problem, with respect.
One of your examples, Stu, was the motorist behind the cyclist that waited for ages and gave them mass. So that's lack of understanding, isn't it, how to deal with it? So there's different types of passing of cyclists. So, at speed, you want to give more distance if you're going slower speeds. So there's lots of issues. I mean, and the bigger issue, Stu, is in terms of where Isle of Man Cycling are coming from and wanting to assist Isle of Man government because they're wanting to implement active travel plans. It's now in their programme for government is. The bigger issue is we could well be spending £25 million per year on diseases caused by inactivity, and that's basically people's lifestyle choices. Per year on the Isle of Man, 25 million, based on British Heart Foundation figures from the UK. So it's absolutely essential that active travel is one part of the solution of eating into that.
But I have to say that whilst I'm broadly supportive of everything that you say, and I've got a few pals who are keen cyclists, so, I wouldn't dare say anything against cyclists. But you said in the interview earlier on that it's the fear factor that's stopping people walking or cycling. I would suggest that that's a nonsense. It's the fact that you turn up sweaty, you've got to wear special clothes, and if it's raining, you end up wet. That's what's stopping people walking or cycling.
Well, it is. You're already identifying all the problems that are there, and we're putting to our government. Private business is already onto this already because they know the wide-ranging benefits of people walking and cycling to work or school, and allow facilities to do that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that cycling is a hobby, Rob, isn't it? It's not a viable alternative to the car.
In short journeys specifically, it's the most sustainable and most efficient way of travelling about our streets. So we're talking about short journeys within 5 kilometres, 3 miles is the most efficient way to travel. I mean, it's not about making people ride the bike. It's about allowing people who do want to do it to do that. And effectively, we know that when all the stars align in terms of, I'm not talking about multi-million-pound infrastructure of cycle lanes. We can't do that on the Isle of Man, but we can think about the way our streets are designed, how traffic moves about, to enable people to do that. And effectively, more people walking and cycling to work reduces the traffic on the road. Your daily commute is reduced by more people walking and cycling to work or going to school.
All right, well, that seems like a reasonable plan. Rob Holden, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. Stu, this 1.5 metre passing push bikes that's under consideration, if this is brought in, then most B roads, the driver's side wheels will be in the gutter on the opposite side of the road. That's for just a single bike. If the Lycra pack's out there, any motorists will have no chance, as they're out on the white lines and none are going to fall back. It's, in my opinion, that the cyclists are the most inconsiderate of all road users. Also, I think they should pay road tax and insurance. That from Ray. Not sure whether... Oh, this is... what's it? From Malcolm about insurance. If a householder has contents, they automatically have $2 million cover for personal liability, which will indemnify them and any member of the household against their legal liability for causing death, injury or damage to third-party property. This covers standard on all contents policies, and it includes electric bikes as long as they don't have to be licensed. Safety equipment. If the highway code is to be changed to give more protection to cyclists, then it would be appropriate to also put in place a code of conduct or rules for them to follow, including compulsory use of cycle helmets and reflective things, plus the fitting and use of warning lights. That from Malcolm, good. If a cyclist undertakes a vehicle, for example in a queue, how should a motorist proceed, asks David H, with caution. Don't give ground to the Lycra pests. Our road tax must have paid for the cycle lane in Douglas. Where's their contribution? They should pay road tax and insurance. Okay, I am a cyclist and I admit most vehicle drivers give me plenty of room when passing. Some don't, and I find they generally are plates or the very elderly. For this reason, I nearly always ride on my own. When I'm driving my car, groups of 4 or more cyclists really annoy me as much as other motorists. I don't think any driver minds groups riding 2 abreast, but when it comes to corners or narrow roads, if the cyclists have any decency, they'd revert to single file. Don't get me started on groups that take up all the road. And please don't get me started on cyclists not paying road tax. Listen, stupid people, there's no such thing as road tax. It goes on vehicle emissions. Well, that's just the way that it's levied. It's still road tax. Work it out for yourselves, says Ian. Right then.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Birth rates down in the Isle of Man. Lowest level since 1987, I think. What do we put that down to? We've got some good comments in here, and some silly ones as well. No wonder the top brains get the degrees and don't come back to the Isle of Man. Quite what's that? That's got to do with birth rates, I'm not sure. Population, maybe. Stu, I put off having kids because we were stuck in private rented house, paying 140 quid a week to a landlord. Worried we couldn't cope, not suitable for kids and their welfare. It's expensive and wages are low. Well, there you go. That's sensible and understandable and perfectly reasonable as well, I would suggest. Stu, low birth rate is down to the pub culture dwindling, lack of opportunity, also pornography online. Japan has the same problem, according to T. Is that how it works, really? Stu, it's the working people who think we can afford kids. It's the teens in commissioners' houses that are breeding like rabbits. That's why in the north it's now known as Pramsey, says Graham. Okay, all right, it's a point of view. I have one child but live in a tiny first-time buyer's house. There's no way I can afford anything bigger, so I won't be having another child. Okay, well, and again, perfectly reasonable that, and very sensible as well, I would suggest. Although, there is a train of thought that says that if you've got one child already, then, you know, your life is effectively over for the next 15 years or so. So you might as well have another one and beat the childhood obesity problem by just dividing the same amount of food amongst the two of them. There you go. 2 birds, 1 stone. Let's go to the lines. We're talking about the drop in the birth rate in the Isle of Man. We've got Matthew on the line. Hello, Matthew.
It just surprises me that this is coming as a surprise. The Isle of Man is not set up to be financially a family-friendly place. If you look at the UK, you get working tax credits, you get childcare paid for, house prices are considerably less.
Yeah.
If you look at the changes with the decoupling of the state pension, so despite working since being the age of 16, I've lost 9 years of state pension contributions by the change that the Isle of Man government's introduced to decouplers from the UK.
Right.
So the incentive to bring people to the island, the working people that are going to financially contribute and grow the population and grow the island economically, is just not here. I'd be £14,000 a year better off living in the UK.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge difference, isn't it?
It's massive. So moving to the Isle of Man, why would you take that pay cut or that income cut to say you've got to buy a more expensive house? And we have looked at going back across. So my house in St John's, if I sell it, I can reduce my mortgage by half and buy a brand new 6-bedroom detached house within a 45-minute commute of London. Yeah. Why wouldn't you do that? The only reason we're still here is because of our family and our support network, and we love the island. Financially, it makes no sense whatsoever. Wow. And then you look at education, and my children are going through primary school now. We have great primary schools, but because we've cut the resources down, in the next 2 years, 2 of my children will be going into mixed classes. So there will be children from the year above and my child's current year. So all the advantages of the better education, the smaller class sizes, are slowly being eroded. You've got the problems in the health service. My wife's disabled. The frontline staff are absolutely fantastic, but trying to find resources for beds and support and additional help, they haven't got the resource, they haven't got the support. And you start to slowly tick all these things off. You look at the first-time buyer scheme, great initiative, until you actually need to move to a bigger house because you've got a family, at which point all that advantage needs paying back, and you've suddenly got to find an extra 25.
Yeah, you're back at square one again, yeah.
So, we talk about wanting to grow the island economically and growing the population, and all we're doing is making us less and less competitive.
Well, I've got a real concern about this, that we're turning into a two-tier society, those who've got and those who haven't. And, I mean, I've got a text from somebody that says, the truth is the island caters for the rich. Money talks. And it's I've got question marks and all sorts of dodgy text, but GO something, I don't know if it's government, all bought and paid for their houses. So, I mean, do you think that that's fair, that we've got a two-tier society?
Definitely not, but the government won't tackle the issues. As unpopular as it is, we need to close the final salary pension scheme for workers. It needs to happen. We can't afford it. We talk about free bus passes. When you've got a pensioner that's 78 years old on a £40,000 pension, final salary pension, and they're getting free bus pass travels at, I think, is it £900,000 a year, the cost, something like that. And
free prescriptions and all the rest, Yeah,
and then you've got families where, at one point we were paying out £6,500 a year in childcare for preschool education.
Yeah.
Not for nursery education, for proper preschool education. That's a lot of money to find.
Of course it is, yeah, absolutely.
And then you've got somebody that's on 40 grand a year with no outgoings, and we're not diverting our resources to support our strategy.
Right.
There are people that need help and support. If you're a pensioner and you're surviving on the state pension and you need to get a bus and that's the other way around, I don't think anybody's got an issue with
Nobody
that.
begrudges that, do they? No,
but let's start being realistic and honest, and realistic with the baby boomer generation, that you've milked the island and milked the world economically. You've ridden the house price bubble.
Yeah.
You've ridden the final salary pension scheme, and it's those of us that were born in the late 70s, 80s and 90s that are now picking up the tab for this. And we need to get realistic, and we need to start changing policy to support families if that's the way the island wants to go. Or we need to be honest about that fact and find some other way to fund our services.
Fantastic. You make some brilliant points. Thank you very much indeed for calling today. What else have we got? Regarding the census, take everything that man just said with a pinch of salt. New housing estates going up and sold straight away. New schools built, etc., etc. If the census form hadn't been written by a 3-year-old, you would have got the truth back, says George. I'm not sure. Birth rate down as many of today's youngsters come from broken families and don't fancy having the struggle for life that their single parent did. That's interesting, isn't it? That's an interesting concept, yeah. When I was a kid, nobody's parents were divorced, and by the time my generation had come through, we were all getting divorced. Low birth rate down to a lack of sex, Stu. Well, I don't know that the sex rate is down, but yes, that which is intended to create life, it would seem, yeah. Obvious population has been reduced in the last few years. Look at the property for sale in the 200 to 450 grand range. Also, waste to energy from waste plant dramatically reducing to the point that we're having to import it. Also, electricity sales on the Isle down year on year. You need people to make babies, and all ours are leaving or have left. slightly bleaker picture than the official word on it, certainly. Being a father of 9, I'm quite happy and willing to help increase the island's birth rate, says Steve. I'm sure you are, yes. Well said, that last caller. Yes, I thought that Matthew made some cracking points there, which certainly I wasn't aware of. And it's very easy to say, well, if you don't like it, there's a boat in the morning. But, if there is that big difference in trying to bring up a young family in the Isle of Man compared to in the UK, the island has to compete on many different levels, not just in terms of financial services and tax rates and things. It's got to appeal to people who want to bring up the families here as well. Regarding your last caller, the UK Health Service is in crisis, paying for so much. We'll say no more, says Ali. Yeah, all right, that's a reasonable point as well. Women want a career nowadays, so they're putting off having kids until they're older. Their priorities have changed, says John. I think that's probably true, but that wouldn't affect the birth rate necessarily. It would just mean that the demographic would change of people who were at the Jane. All young people are leaving. Why should they stay to pay for MEA loans and pensions? They'll meet people across and live elsewhere, as there's little to keep them here. No young people, no babies. Simple, really. Okay. I also agree the brains leave the island and stay there, and there's little incentive for people moving here. We'd leave, but for family. All right. Maybe Carlsberg doesn't reach the parts anymore that other beers don't reach. Gotta laugh, says Rich. Thank you, Richard. Hey boy, the reason for the dip in population is down to the installation of a second condom machine in the Stanley. Facts, says Frank. I can't wait till the UK come and take the island back. I was chatting with the current MHK and he confirmed if the island goes bankrupt, we can't borrow money. Well, I think we all knew that, didn't we? But can't wait until the UK comes and takes the island back. That would be the worst possible thing in the universe, as far as I'm concerned. That'd be worse than Trump being made president of the USA. Bible says go forth and multiply. Go and do likewise, says David H. Who'd come here to do low-paid jobs and pay £1,000 to estate agents to find somewhere to rent, let alone have kids? Plus they want $500 deposit for gas, and there's not much to do here except look at scenery. You won't be happy here, I don't think. Stu, in relation to the Western demographic time bomb due to lowering birth rates, this decrease is set against the continuing and inexorable increase in world population, hurtling as it is towards 7.5 billion people. Most of the world's current problems can be connected to the ever-rising number of people on Earth, including the recent Middle Eastern migrations to the West, from places of scarce resources and strife to the rich West. So instead of adding to the world more Western people by encouraging an increase in birth rate amongst us, perhaps this is an argument for bringing skilled people to the West. They're going to breed anyway, wherever they are. Have them do it once established in the West and make use of their desire to work for our benefit in supporting the Western economies. This conclusion does go against current policy and public mood. Most people don't see the long view of things, and population integration is difficult, as has been proven time and time again. But it is food for thought, at least. That's from our friend Mark. I'm not sure about that, Mark. There are all sorts of nationalist websites, the BNP or whatever they call Britain First, that I see posts on Facebook that they're saying that the problem is that you've got this immigrant Muslim population of the UK, and they tend to have more children than people indigenous to the UK, and that way it means that the Muslims are going to take over. Now, whether or not you've got to read the Daily Mail or not to believe that kind of thing, I don't know. Whether or not there's a bit of truth in it, or complete and utter scaremongering nonsense, I really don't know, but it's maybe part of the equation. Stuart had a chat with a retired police officer. If he lives till he's 90, the amount he'll receive from his pension is quite staggering. No wonder we have a pension black hole, and how can this continue, says Paul. Well, if anybody lives until the 90, it's going to cost a lot of money in pensions, isn't it? But how many people do, realistically? I'm not going to read that one out. How can the birth rate be at its lowest in years when one of the usual suspects who texts you says it's plebs in council houses who breed like rabbits? That from Billy. What else? The Isle of Man is one hell of an expensive place to live, and that includes for young people, full stop, according to Bob. Stu, myself and my partner have decided not to have children. Money's tight and we don't want to throw ourselves in debt or sponge off the system. Well, good for you, and good that you thought it through like that. Also, the world, not just Britain or the Isle of Man, is in a real mess. Would anybody want to bring future taxpayers, and that's all we are, into a world that in 50 years will probably have destroyed itself anyway? That from Glenn. Well, it's a bleak view, Glenn, but I suspect that there's an amount of truth in that in terms of why probably a good number of people are putting off having babies.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
We're talking about border security for the Isle of Man. See, if we had a border with Mexico, we could build a big wall like President Trump, but we haven't. And so do we ought to have greater security as far as ferry travellers, for example, are concerned? Let's go to the lines and see what Buster makes of this one. Hello, Buster.
I mean, we are where we are today, and that is wherever we go, we have to carry ID, whether we want to get the tickets for the plane, etc. So I'm a big supporter because I would rather be safe than having somebody who is trying to kill me. But more importantly, I think if they've taken that step, then just take a little bit more and scan in who you are. So at any point in time, government will know who's in and who's out.
Oh, right. A bit Big Brother, though, really, that, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, I'm not saying, it has to be phased in over maybe 5 years. But, yeah, I think the government should know who's in and who's out.
Right.
Because what harm is, if there's an issue, they can, they're not likely to be using it as they can't use it as a Big Brother tool, but it is there, and I mean, why not capture that information? I mean, it could pick up a record of somebody who's come here, who's, shall we say, wanted elsewhere.
Okay.
So, yeah, I would support it. And also,
you're all for it?
Yeah, just for, I mean, we've been talking about it for years as to who's in and who's out.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to do ID, you might as well add that little bit onto it. And, it's not a question of being for it, really, Stu. The days are long gone where you could travel as Mr. A. You have to have your passport or whatever to get your airplane ticket. So, yeah.
All right, fair dues. Thank you very much, Buster. Let's go to line 2. We've got Chris on. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Stu.
Yeah.
I'm against ID, really, because for me the beauty of the Isle of Man is the lack of legislation, and I don't really think that we need it just yet.
Okay.
You go down Douglas High Street, there's not many shops getting blown up or planes getting hijacked. And for me, really, the big terrorist is the government body that's got the time to waste our money and their time on such surveys and studies.
All right, fair dues, all right.
If I really thought, I'm not stupid, if I thought that we were getting so many bad people in, I know we get the odd drug dealer and things, but the police deal with that reasonably well.
Yeah.
For me, it's just going to be another hassle at the ferry or the airport.
All right.
So for me, I'd not go down that route.
Yeah, well, it's only the ferry, really, isn't it? Because the airport, you've got to take passports and things anyway and do security.
Yeah, you're right. Good. I realised that when I
said it. No, it's all right, Chris. Thank you very much for your call today. Nice to talk to you. Let's go to the lines and see what Howard makes of this. Hello, Howard.
Hi, Stu. The steam packet, well, they would have to implement it, but of course there'd have to be government workers down there.
Yeah.
But we've got all the security at the airport and nothing at the steam packet.
Yes.
It's a bit like locking your back door and leaving a notice on the front door. This is not locked. Come on in.
I suppose I never thought about it. I mean, it's a while since I've been on the boat. It's probably about 5 years since I've been on the boat, but I'm fairly sure that they knew who I was when I booked last time.
Oh, yeah, they will do. But there's not to say that if you go to the likes of Gatwick or somewhere, they photograph as you're going through, and if you're not on that photograph when you get up to the boarding, you don't get on board.
Right, okay.
And this is where I could book a passage on the steam packet, and then somebody else turn up.
Yes.
And that chap has just been on now, said how many shops have been blown up and do we have to wait for that?
Okay.
And then have a knee-jerk reaction?
All right, but the flip side of this is, and I think most people would say, yeah, there's nothing wrong with a bit more security, but if it makes the Isle of Man less attractive to people...
I don't think it's going to do that because they're going through it anyway.
No, but we've said on the programme so many times, Howard, and I think you've agreed with me, that air travel is just a misery these days.
It's a pain.
Well, we don't want to do the same with boats, because if anything, we ought to be making the most of the fact that, come on the boat to the Isle of Man and you don't have to go through all that painful security and queuing up.
You do across. I've been on coaches going down through to Germany and places, and the coaches pulled into what you would term as a warehouse, and security come on board, check it out, and what's it take? 5 minutes.
Right, yeah.
And I would much rather have that 5 minutes known both myself and our family and everything else was secure.
Yeah.
That is a mouse hole behind the sideboard.
All right, fair dues.
The actual business of security would be in-house and there'd be no problems with it.
Yeah, that's part of the problem, I think, is that security seems to be usually undermanned, and that's why it seems to take forever to get through these things. It could be sped up dramatically, I would have thought. Back to the lines on line 2, we've got Stephen. Stephen, good afternoon.
Of course, I'm against it because I'm a great supporter of individual civil liberties, and I conclude that this is a greater infringement upon the liberty of the individual. There is no proven state that we are unsafe. In fact, the Isle of Man is one of the safest places to live in the British Isles and goes on to live in Western Europe.
That's possibly only because nobody knows where we are or who we are.
Possibly, that's one of our great... But that doesn't mean that everybody, as soon as they do know where we are, is going to want to come here and do us harm.
Yeah.
This idea that's being published and put forward is that we will be safer is an absolute nonsense. We won't be any safer. If somebody was intent on doing us harm, they will get round all these infringements, which only affect the law-abiding citizen and make it more difficult for us, and it's an inconvenience. But what I wanted to go on to say, Stu, was we live in what is known as the common travel area of the British Isles. And that means that for the citizen, it means that once you've entered into the common travel area, that means that the border force of the UK looks after the borders of the Isle of Man, which is not a country, incidentally. We are not a country. We are not a sovereign country that needs borders or indeed should have borders.
Yeah.
So we are in the common travel area, and there's no requirement for us to produce this documentation. It will only be an inconvenience, and in my view, it's a job creation scheme, and it further force goes along with the snooping that the state is wanting to do.
Well, I've got to say that I find a lot of validity in what you're saying there, because certainly as far as air travel is concerned, it doesn't seem to catch the bad guys, but it seems to inconvenience the good guys, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And really, who have you met really these days that says, I'm perfectly happy with travel on an airline? Nobody is.
No.
Now let's look at the issue of the Waverley, or what's the other boat that comes here from Scotland and other places. So those people are on a day out.
Yeah.
They don't want to worry, have they brought their passports with them? For goodness sake, they've travelled within the UK. We are within the UK. We're not a separate country to set up border controls. They've come here on the Waverley, and all of a sudden they arrive at Peel Breakwater. Oh, where's your travel documents? Who are you?
Okay. What about things like...
Unless they go... Stu, my whole point is this. Unless it's going to be done absolutely properly, it's only an inconvenience to those who are using the ferry.
And a job creation scheme.
To all the private airfields and private helicopters that come in and the private craft, it won't.
Well, it kind of is already.
Job creation scheme.
In terms of private aircraft, I know about that, because if I want to fly off Ireland to anywhere, I have to fill in what's called a GAR form and lodge it with Special Branch before I'm able to do it.
Well, does anybody come and check you, actually?
I've never been checked, but I know people who have. No.
I don't know whether I can say this over the air.
Yeah.
It's BS in in equals BS out.
What about, I take your point about terrorists and about the common travel area. What about the movement of criminals, though? Because let's presume, and I don't know if it's true, that most of the drugs that come in come on the boat.
Stu, we live in a country where the situation is this. You are presumed innocent until you are found guilty. Mm-hmm. The traveller is not presumed to be a criminal until he's found guilty. That's not how our situation works.
Okay. All right.
We are here as free citizens of the UK. And if the Isle of Man is wanting to become an independent nation by other means, I think the people of the island should be asked, do you want to break away from the UK? Mm. And that's the honest question, because Scotland doesn't have border controls.
All right,
Ireland doesn't have them. You've got a long border between Ireland and the UK. And the Prime Minister, Theresa May, a few weeks ago said she is absolutely determined to ensure that the common travel area that exists in the British Isles with the the Southern Irish, who are going to remain within the European Union, is not, we don't go back to the situation of border controls. She is adamant in that.
All right.
And so why are we introducing border controls?
Yep, fair dues, Stephen. Some very good points there. Thank you very much for calling. And let's take our last caller for now on this, and it's Jill. Hello, Jill.
I've got another point of view.
Go on.
I'm elderly, right, and I used to have a passport, but I've stopped travelling abroad now, so I'm not paying that money out for a passport just to sit in the drawer. And when I stop driving, I won't have a driving licence, which I use as ID now. So these ID cards would be identification for me, because you do need it, not just for travelling. I've just made a will and I had to produce ID.
Yeah.
You know, I think it would be a useful thing to have. It's only like be the size of a bank card. You shove it in your wallet and you show a passport, you show an ID card.
So you think the idea of having an ID card is a good one?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, fair dues. Thank you very much, Jill. Again, an interesting thought. And the secret is probably held by Ken online too. Let's find out. Hello, Ken.
Well, not really, because I was a respondent online and I put various objections up to this.
Uh-huh.
But having said all that, if it does come in, we'd have to. We should really go the whole hog and have a national identity card, which you've got to carry with you at all times.
Oh.
But that's another issue. Basically, we haven't got past the first hurdle, because the UK will, I don't think, agree to this.
Okay.
And they're going to have to say so.
So what threat is there that makes you think that we'd be better off with ID cards and security?
No, that's only if we have an ID card for you have to produce ID for the boat, so might as well go the whole hog and have ID cards. So, I said that's a separate issue. That was what I finished off with, said no object to this, but if we do have, because he's going to have a proper ID card that can't be counterfeited.
Like a passport?
Well, no, passport. Yes, but you have to have a proper passport.
Yeah.
So whoever's checking your passport's got to have the technology to say, there's something wrong with this.
Yeah, okay.
The old biometric thing.
Biometrics. Well, I think all new passports have got biometrics in, haven't they?
Well, yeah, but you've got to have the machine to check it.
Yeah, you wouldn't have thought that was beyond the ken of our
port. Who's going to do that? Steam packets? Does that mean the fares?
No, it should be a government thing, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be down to the steam packet if it was...
Well, yeah, so that means you're going to have Manx people in Heysham.
Steady. Yep, okay. All right, fair dues.
More expense.
Right, fair. Let's move on, and I think we've got Alistair on. Hello, Alistair.
Yeah, I've got two or three things I'd like to mention about this.
Go ahead.
First and foremost, I have to say my personal opinion is that we have got to have this ID.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much a discussion document at all. It's a necessity. And the reason I say that is, first and foremost, the Chief Constable is in total agreement with all this. He actually wants all this. And he is the security of the island.
But what threat is there to the island that this is going to ameliorate?
Well, there's two or three things. The first thing is that we're leaving, or should be leaving, the European Union.
Mm.
Now, the common travel agreement, as it stands at the moment, allows people into Southern Ireland without... They can come to from Southern Ireland to here without any ID.
Okay.
Right? Now, they can move from the whole of Europe into Southern Ireland because Southern Ireland is part of the European Union.
Okay, I would have thought that the authorities would get wise to that, though, if people were abusing that.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, could you just go and have a look at the UK? How many people do you think are living in the UK that have come in the back door over the last 20 years?
Okay.
I mean, it has got to be stopped, in my view.
All right.
And as I say, you just need to look at England. Perfect example of where do you go from there. Ireland is under the forthcoming arrangements of the European Union. Ireland is a big, big problem for us with our ferry going from here to Dublin and here to Belfast.
All right, fair comment.
Okay.
I'd not thought of it, but since you mention it, I can see that.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
We've been talking about port security for the Isle of Man, and who'd have thought that so many people had strong views about this? But, as we've heard, a lot of people have called in today, which is fantastic, and lots of different views as well, pro or anti this. Hello, Stu, I don't think we need port security. What with the prices that Steam Packet are charging, says Gary and Ramsey. I've always brought my passport when using the Steam Packet boats. We have to watch out for Islamic terrorists. We're an easy target for them. That's from Davey. Are we? Okay. Can you say hello to Peter Lazy Cowan? I believe that we should have travel cards. Okay. You hear voices, Stu. That's the second sign of madness after talking to yourself, says Davey. Yeah, clearly, yeah. Hey boys, small boats and light aircraft can go anywhere, no ID needed, doing drug drops, etc. That's not true, Graham. If I wanted to go off island in a light aircraft somewhere, I'd have to file a GAR, General Aviation Report, I think it is, with all the authorities so that everybody knows where I'm going. Now, whether or not they check me at the other end, Carnarvon, I've been to Carnarvon a couple of times and they're quite hot there. But then I don't suppose the security guys there, the customs guys, have got very much to do. So they do seem quite on the ball at Carnarvon. Not so much in other places, but you never know when they're going to turn up. So there is a requirement there, and I presume that there's a similar thing for boats. Stu, I think it's Big Brother micromanagement. Are we really at risk of what? No, it's just the Orwellian society, says somebody. I can see that as an argument. I'm a bit on the fence, unusually on this one, in that I can see both sides of the argument, I think. Totally agree with more security, otherwise it'll only be a matter of time before a ferry or a cruise ship is targeted by terrorists, then it's too late. You can't have an attitude of it can't happen here anymore. That from Jack in Port St Mary. Are we, though? Is it inevitable that terrorists are going to want to blow up a cruise ship or a ferry boat? Stu, there are people coming into the island from Southern Ireland all the time with no checks, and that's open borders, so they can walk in here with no checks. All right, I think that point was just made. As far as security goes, there's a two-way glass-in tunnel on approach to the boat. When boarding, police do keep check on people known booking tickets in false names, as far as they can. Oh, good, okay. More government employees to man other points of entry, i.e. yacht fishermen in Peel, Port Erin, Port St Mary and Ramsey. I suppose that's the worry, isn't it, that it's a job creation scheme. We're a sovereign dependency and are allowed free movement of criminals or facilitating this. I don't think we want a Manx version of the Stasi, thank you. Not only can we not afford it, but it would be an infringement of civil liberty, says Mick. I'm sure the police have sufficient resources and access to intelligence to keep us as safe as we have been this last few centuries. Well, there is that proportionality. Have we been under threat from terrorist organisations? No. Have people been moving to immigrating to the Isle of Man illegally? We think probably not. So is there a threat based on historical data? One would suggest not. Stu, your caller says that we have to wait for Strand Street to be blown up? There's no circumstance in which anyone would care to blow up any part of Isle of Rock. We're of no interest to any form of terrorist. They go for large, high-profile targets, not unknown little backwaters such as us. Is it really wise for us to restrict our own liberties for the sake of a non-existent threat? Good point. More grounded view of this sort of issue is required. As for drugs, an ID system would make no difference. Sniffer dogs are already deployed for that purpose. Perhaps a few more are required, but that's an issue for another day. And that from Mark, who usually makes a good point. Since when were we in the UK? Asks Margaret. Stephen sort of might have mentioned that in passing, but no, I'm sure he didn't mean that. There's enough security at the moment. There are random searches which are more than enough to keep the island safe. The police are looking out for folk who shouldn't be coming to the island. If I travel by ferry to the Scottish Islands, when some of the journeys are longer than going to the Isle of Man, I don't need to have any ID. What about fishing boats, pleasure craft, etc.? Will somebody be checking on these? If somebody wants to smuggle in explosives, etc., they're likely to come across in a small boat during darkness, says David. I think that's probably true as well. Thank you.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should essential roadworks be carried out 6 days a week rather than 5? Infrastructure chiefs are planning to close Lazaire Road in Ramsey along to the Glen Aldin junction for 9 months over a 2-year period. 9 months, wow. The first phase of the works are due to start shortly after the TT in June and be completed before the Festival of Motorcycling. There's been a nearly 3-month delay to the scheme already. What do you make of this? Is 6-day working the best solution to get the work done as quickly as possible? It seems I'm always a little bit reluctant to criticise things like this because I'm not a civil engineer. I don't really know what's involved in doing jobs like this. But it just strikes me that 9 months is a huge period of time to do something like that. I don't know about trade allure and all the rest of it, but is this one man with a spoon rebuilding the road? And the other thing that crosses my mind is why don't they finish Foxdale first with twice the number of people and then move up to Ramsey and use that same number of people up there? I'm sure there are answers to all these questions. You may have your own, or you might have your own suggestions about this. Is this just a good idea or a reason to build up overtime by having people working at the weekends? Would overtime be payable? Would it just be normal pay? I don't know. Let's see what your comments are on this. Stu, my office used to have a notice. Lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. Government departments, please note, says David H. I like that. Lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. Yes, I like that. We'll have that one. As the parish walk has been deferred for the cycle race, will these roadworks affect the parish walk route? I'd not thought of that, maybe. 9 months to do 1 mile of road. Good God, the Japanese had a tsunami and had motorways back within weeks. Jim Davidson, isn't he a comedian, says Frank. I'm sure it's not the first time he's heard that, though, Frank. Please do not use the DOI to do Lazaire Road in Ramsey. It'll take 3 times longer and 3 times more expensive than a private contractor. Completely useless. The work ethic is that of a sloth on sedatives. No. It's funny. I mean, it's probably highly unfair, but it's funny. A sloth on sedatives, then. DOI don't have a big enough brew hut to have too many workers at one spot at once. I can see the way this is going. Bit of balance, somebody, please. Anybody, please come on and support the DOI boys. The DOI seem to work in teams of 5 to 1, 1 working and 5 watching, says Gary. The same people who complain about the state of the roads are the same ones who complain about road closures. You have to crack a few eggs to make an omelette. They should work 24/7 to get it done. I think Foxdale will be done by then, says Neil. Yes, 24/7. That'd be popular with all the residential what's around there, all the houses working 24/7. But you're quite right. We do complain that the roads are in a bad state, and then we complain about the roadworks when they do them. It just seems that in the Isle of Man, everything seems to take forever. I mean, talk about Douglas Promenade taking years and years, and the Peel Road was going to take ages, and wasn't done properly, and flood. It just seems that all these things take forever, and I'd hate for people to tell me that there's a boat in the morning if I don't like the way we fix our roads, but I have to say, I don't like the way that we fix our roads. How about you? Here's a bit of balance for you. How about this, Stu? You have a month building a new road, and the guy on the road has a month in the studio playing music. Then you might see how it's done. Well, that's fair. That's fair. I have to say that I'd be completely and utterly useless. If you saw my hands, they are the hands of a man who's never done an honest day's work in his life. So I'd be completely useless at it. And the chances are that the road construction operative might not be terribly good at this either. But no, it's a fair point. It's easy to criticise. Parish walk is before they start, says somebody else. Same as Foxdale roadworks, simply embarrassing. Same amount of roadworks in the UK would be done in a handful of days. Fact. DOI haven't got the workers. Foxdale is contractors. Ramsey will be too. Get your facts right, people. Oh, okay. All right. So not DOI then. It's going to be contractors. Hang on a minute. Why are the DOI talking about it then? Can't even guarantee that there's a boat in the morning anymore, says somebody else. They can only produce certain amounts of tarmac a day on the island. It doesn't matter how big the workforce is if they have nothing to put down. All right, okay. Hey boy, maybe the 9 months is to allow for stress breaks and the broken flask of tea, says Frank. They should be working 7 days a week to get it done, not 6. Also, but then you'd get all the churchgoers complaining about it, day of rest and all that. Also, has anyone thought how emergency vehicles would get to RGS? Probably not, says Steve. Although there's been a risk assessment done, I'm sure. Problem could be the fact that there are 3 school entrances plus a road to the Crossroads campsite plus loads of properties with only access onto Lazaire Road. Okay, all right. No, that's a fair comment. Some common sense at last from the DOI. Work longer hours in the long days of summer, says Mecky. Okay. Manxys can't use boat in the morning, as even that's not guaranteed now with Mickey Mouse steam packets, says somebody else. Right then. Hi Stu referenced the roadworks in Ramsey. They've been going on and off for a couple of years already, and what is the disruption going to be like for TT, Grand Prix and now the cycling? I agree with you though. How can it take so long, and what are they doing there? Should just put all hands on deck at full capacity on one major job at a time, says Jan. Okay. Don't forget, Peel Road was done by private contractors. Look what we got there. I must say the DOI lads on the Foxdale main road job are doing a great job. Nobody's standing around on that job. By the way, it is DOI doing Foxdale. That's from a Foxdale resident. Oh, thank you. Okay. I'll just let our listeners disagree amongst themselves, I think. Stu, I think the DOI do a great job. Yes, some kind do take a considerable amount of time, but they're done properly. That's from Sean. Thank you. Well, a little bit of balance there. Not everybody having a go at the DOI boys. Main contractor is Island Drainage on Main Road, Foxdale. Fact, says Josh. Oh, I'm not getting involved in this. You can argue amongst yourselves on this one. I live in Foxdale. It's the DOI that are working on that job, you see. They're doing a great job, always obliging when a resident who's trapped in needs anything, with terraced houses either side of the road, each having a gas pipe going to it, each having a sewer pipe going to it, each having a water pipe going to it. Under the road is very busy, not just a case of a digger ripping it all out and relaying it. A lot of the work is being done by hand. Right, okay, thank you.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks to everyone who took part in the programme. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or you can get your thoughts to us via Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag #MRTalkingHeads. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, why not suggest it by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.